Law and order in UI design. Grids. Starting a new project can be exciting, but it also means you are starting from a blank page, which can be frightening. The question is always, how do I start? Or what do I do first? There is no right answer to that question, but why not start at the beginning? Placing the basic parameters and layout on the piece of paper, blank canvas, or artboard will give you the structural support to build your project further. When it comes to interaction design, website, landing page, web application, etc., the basic layout can be set with a grid system. A grid system will help you place the desired elements and manage the spaces between them, so it all looks cohesive and purposeful. So what are grids? Grids are usually defined as a structure made out of vertical and horizontal lines that follow a certain pattern. It is like a skeleton that holds it all together and supports the whole design composition on the page. They are not meant to limit the design, but to make everything flow together and look like a part of a whole. This is the first step to making your concept much more intuitive and easy for your users to understand and follow. What is their purpose? Easier and faster design process. Having a structure you can follow makes everything go at a faster pace. It helps with sizing all the elements in the right way, measuring the adequate distance between them both horizontally and vertically, and creating a balance between the different shapes and sizes. Making a pixel-perfect design is much easier when you have a structural foundation that holds everything together. Cohesiveness and consistency. Creating elements in a grid system makes the whole design have its own flow and rhythm, making it easy on the eye. People like harmony and consistency in contrast to scattered pieces that feel messy. Even small things like unified spacing between elements can make the design have a cohesive feel to it. Responsive design. In this day and age, interactive design means that any digital creation product can be experienced across multiple devices or screens, from a small smartphone to a big screen TV. In all of those scenarios, the design should look pixel perfect, compact, understandable, and sleek. The grid can help you rearrange all the elements in the needed screen size, but at the same time keep organized and structured. Better designer-developer collaboration. When handing out your design to the developers, you expect to see everything coded just the way you have envisioned it. If you include a grid system in your designs, the developer will immediately understand how to ration the paddings and margins, how to size the different elements, and how they flow together one section after another. Grid helps both sides understand the desired outcome better without direct guidance or unnecessary confusion. Let's talk about the terminology. Columns are usually defined as the building blocks of the grid system. They are same-sized vertical sections that go from the top to the bottom of the page, and their purpose is to dictate the width and the number of elements per row. The most used system is the 12-column grid for desktop, 8-column grid for tablet, and 4 or 2-column grid for mobile. The width of a single column unit is usually between 60-80 px, which will determine the desired container width going further. Rows are same-sized horizontal units that go from the left to the right side of the page. They are rarely used together with the column grid system since the height of the elements is often defined by their content amount. Gutters are the same-sized empty spaces between the columns and rows that give breathing room and help you define an equal distance between elements, both horizontally and vertically. Their size is usually 10-30 px in width. Side margins, or container margins, are the empty areas from the left and the right side of the page, outside of the grid columns. They give breathing space to the containing elements and shrink together with the screen size until the next breaking point. On desktops and tablets, their size depends on the width of the column grid system. For mobile, their width ranges between 10-20 px. Why the 12-column grid system? This is the most famous grid system, and there is a valid mathematical explanation why. The number 12 is easily divisible with 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12, which gives a lot of flexibility to design multiple sizes of elements. Also, developers usually use the bootstrap grid, which is also based on the 12-column grid system, and it creates our symbiotic ecosystem. There are more types of grids, like 8-column grids, no gutter grids, etc., but we will focus the examples and rules mostly on the 12-column grid. Grid. Rules and examples. Fit the elements inside the columns and leave the gutters as an equal breathing space between the elements. Do not extend the elements into the gutters. Don't forget about the horizontal spacing and try keeping it consistent, especially for repetitive elements. Boxed elements like cards or images are easily defined inside the grid, but working with opened elements can sometimes be tricky. So in some cases you need to add additional inside padding to avoid having them look crammed together. The smaller elements inside a parent element do not fall under the rules of the grid. As long as the parent element is successfully positioned, the elements inside it can have their own layout. You don't always have to use all 12 columns for certain sections. If there is not enough content or it would just look and feel better, using for example 10 or 8 columns, out of the 12, is just fine. This especially applies to text sections, since it is not a good practice to write text that goes from one side of the page to the other, since it is going to be harder to read and follow. Going responsive. The usual path is going from a 12-column grid on bigger screen sizes, to 8 on smaller laptops, to 4 on tablets and to 2 on mobile. Be mindful of the size of the gutters when going from bigger to smaller screens, since they should probably be smaller than on the bigger screens. If you have set it to be 30px on bigger screens, 10 or 15px is just enough for mobile. Breaking the rules. Now and then, going off the grids is considered the right move. After you make sure that everything is within the grid and is all lined up, don't be afraid to make sections that step out of the grid to make the design more interesting and elements to pop out. Examples of elements breaking the grid. Header. The header can look good if it is out of the bounds of the grid. Just be careful not to place the elements, like the logo or the menu, too close to the edges of the page. You can achieve that by putting at least 50px margins on both sides. Hero and featured sections. When everything else is structured properly, these full-width sections instantly make an impact just by breaking the rhythm. Some content inside these sections can still abide by the rules. Decorative elements, shapes and forms that add aesthetic value to the design can be spread out anywhere on the page. Coming from outside the page and sometimes just barely touching the grid or coming in between or behind some elements. They are positioned there to make the design more fun and do not have to be constrained inside the grid lines. Images that break out of the grid. This is a common example with images that do not have a fixed rectangular shape or if some elements go outside of the image. It makes them visually more appealing since they stand out from the crowd. This also applies to images that take up just half of the screen, and the other half is used for text, or anything else. When you really understand it and feel comfortable with the grid, a whole new perspective opens up. You will start breaking the rules here and there and the design will still look structured and balanced. Just make the effort of learning the grid system more in depth and that will give you the directions of when to stick to it and when it is cool to make some sections pop out of it. Have fun, smiley face. It can take some time to get used to the grid system and abide by its rules while maintaining creativity and visual design excellence. Yet, I can say with all the certainty that the grid system is by far the best thing I have learned in my design learning process. It gives me guidelines that I can follow, but at the same time, it allows me to weave my point of view in every design while also considering the developer's perspective.